Welcome back to another live and amplified Indie Fusion podcast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we're back at it again with another amazing podcast. Tonight, we have a very special guest joining us. We have Gina Powers. How's it going today?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. Things are going. We survived Hurricane Burl yesterday.
Oh,
I'm down
gosh.
at I'm down in Texas, so we survived Burl, and everything's going okay.
I'm glad to hear it, and prayers to those folks that are dealing with that.
Yeah, it was not a good thing for a lot of people. So,
That's
um,
right. Mm.
but excited to have you here, excited to chat a little bit and get to know more about you. You're originally from Fargo, and are you based out of Nashville now, or where are you based out of now?
I'm kind of a bi-city kind of
Hmm.
instead of bi-coastal, it's bi-inland, but I'm in North Dakota. I also work out of Tennessee though, because I do a lot of recording and songwriting rounds and things like that down there and connect with songwriters down in Nashville. So
Nice.
um from from Fargo, I spent a couple years actually living in Nashville,
Hmm.
but I've been centered a little bit closer to home these last few months since spring, and I'm sure loving being home. Feels really good.
Yeah, for sure. I've almost moved to North Dakota once, and it was during the fracking boom, and
Oh,
so I was going to live up to I was going to move up to Williston.
yes, out west,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I work in the TV industry, and I had a job offer out there, except they didn't tell me how expensive everything was out there.
Right.
And so it ended up not working out. But everybody keeps telling me you dodged a bullet on that one. And not saying Fargo and Williston are the same thing, but Williston, they were like, you dodged a major bullet on that one. So
Well, North Dakota has had a number of booms and
yeah,
the change, I wouldn't call them busts, but just changes,
yeah,
things. The only thing that's certain is that everything's changing, right?
yeah,
So, yeah.
100%. So growing up in Fargo, what was it like growing up there? Was it pretty normal or yeah?
Okay, well, so I didn't get here to Fargo until I was about midway through my sophomore year in high school.
Okay.
Um, I was born originally in San Francisco, but I did a lot of travel for a lot of reasons
Yeah.
that are, this podcast isn't long enough to get into. But
Okay.
by the time I got to Fargo, I had been to 17 schools in my life. And although I'd gotten to experience some really cool things, living in Alaska, living on Maui, living in Idaho, just living in a really lot of Tahoe, um, I didn't have a place that was felt like home underneath my feet for a long time, and so coming to Fargo was really almost like a landing, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And the people of Fargo are very welcoming and wholesome in many ways, and really kind of took me in as
Nice.
a child of the community, and I found very quickly a group of friends and family, friends that were like family that
Yeah.
kind of kept track of me and all that kind of stuff in a way. And yeah, so my experience growing up in Fargo is not the same
Hmm.
as others experience. I can tell you, coming in from the outside, there was definitely culture shock to me. I had lived in a lot of communities in larger cities where there was just a huge diverse array of folks. And when I came up here, it was just very Scandinavian and very reserved. And so, there wasn't the Puerto Rican grandma at the corner making tortillas, and there wasn't, you know what I mean? There
Hmm.
wasn't the Japanese family down the road, so it just or the Korean family. So it was a different experience coming up here, but I'm so glad that I did. The weather is very extreme. I
Yep.
think that breeds a very helpful, stoic, and compassionate people, and we take care of each other well. So yeah, Fargo is a good place. It's very, very, very cold in the winter, and so you dodged a bullet in that way
Yeah.
for sure. Especially if you're a Texas man, I don't know that you would like 40 below zero wind chill. It's not pleasant.
Yeah. Well, originally I'm from Chicago, so 40 below would
Oh,
have 40 below would have still been extreme, but the lake effect and all that stuff, I was okay with that. So
Yeah, you know that. Well, it's kind of cool that you're from Chicago originally, because a lot of my early childhood was spent in Milwaukee, which is
Oh,
not too far from Chicago, of
mhm.
course. And so I've definitely been in those stomping grounds, enough that it took me a long time to not call a water fountain a bubbler. I thought they
Yeah.
were called bubblers, and I learned later that that wasn't true any place but Milwaukee. And
Well,
sometimes Chicago.
actually, if in the East Coast, I believe that's like if you go up and down the East Coast, I think that's what they call water fountains.
Oh my goodness,
I
I
think,
gotta do this. Is a great idea for my next Americana album. It will have to be, or EP, it'll have to be In Search of the Bubblers.
right?
The
That's
bubbler
cool.
people.
Nice.
Find my people.
That's amazing. Oh, and so then where does music kind of start coming into play? Were you already in Fargo, or were you exploring like music and stuff before you moved to Fargo?
I've always been musical, always been musical. I remember hearing music for the first time and really just acknowledging it. And it was Gladys Knight. It was Gladys Knight and the Pips, but it was her very beautiful voice. It was so velvety, so beautiful. And yeah, and I was about 2-ish years old,
Mhm.
because we were in San Francisco and it was midnight train to Georgia. And from that moment, I was just hooked. I was hooked.
Nice.
And yeah, and I sang. I sang everything. And of course, I wanted to sing, and I danced, and I did all of those things. So it's always been a thing. Full time, it's been a little over a decade that I've pursued this as a full-time vocation and made my living as a musician. And I'm really glad that in some ways it's like, oh, I waited a little bit. Maybe some industry folks would say I even waited too long. But you know
Mm,
what? I don't know that that's true, because I have a lot of life experience to draw on and
mm,
context for writing. And I think that gives it a different take. And when I sing from a place of experience and emotion that's pretty deep. So, yeah, I think that it's been good. It's been
mhm.
good to explore. And finally get a chance to kind of live out my dream as
Nice.
I turn 40 and try and pursue this as a career.
Nice. That's amazing. Would you say throughout your life, doing all the traveling and all the moving around, especially during the younger year or in high school, grade school, and all that stuff,
Yeah.
would you say music was kind of like that equalizer that helped you relate with new? I'm going to say new kids because that's just kind of the only word I could think of. But as you kind of move into new schools and have to make new friends, do you think music was kind of that equalizer that made it a little bit of an easier transition?
At times I think it did, because I had a singing talent, from a very young age. And so I was always able to kind of find a home in the music department through choir
Mm-hmm.
and singing in that regard. At least I was able to connect on some level often in that
Yeah.
way. Um, but more than connecting with others, and of course there's always the window. It's like, how cool are you when you're in, especially middle school and high school, how cool are you based on which bands you're listening to?
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell so much about a kid and their personality and how much of an individual versus, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
based on their music choices and what they're listening to. But more than really connecting with friends, which I did, and oftentimes faked it, because oftentimes there was music that at the time I don't know that I identified very well with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I was at home listening to Teddy Pendergrass and Pat Metheny and Earl
Yeah.
Clue and Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez and Aretha Franklin. I was having a harder time identifying with some of the other kind of at that time the second new wave coming in,
Mm-hmm.
with the second British invasion, I think they call it oftentimes, with Culture Club and the different 80s music that was coming in. So
Yeah.
yeah, I look back now with all those songs with huge nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
But music is an equalizer in the sense that it gave me a window into experiences that were beyond the textbook experience of life that I had thought was a thing. You know what I mean?
Mm,
If you want to know how complicated life is, you know, put on a Billie Holiday record, you know?
yeah.
So at 12, you know, I was learning to play guitar. My father taught me three chords. At that time I was living in Tahoe. I learned Puff the Magic Dragon, and I had a pile of records, just piles and piles of records, I should say, and too much time on my hands. And so I did a few things. I danced ballet, and I did ballet lessons, and which I always loved doing. And I also listened to records and sang and played that silly guitar. I played and played and played and played that guitar, and I didn't know how to play it. And we didn't, you know, this is before the time of YouTube where you can say, how do you play that riff or that chord or
Yeah.
whatever, or tune. Even I even tuned by ear because there was no tuning, you know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
just taught myself this funky way to play guitar. And I listened to all the records, and I identified with some songs so deeply, and they felt like a soundtrack to my life, and I would learn them. And so in that way, yeah, it was the equalizer,
Hmm.
because it helped me know I wasn't alone. It helped me survive a very challenging period of my life. You know, my mother passed away when I was 11,
Oh, wow.
and I was taken from my stepfather. I had been raised by my mom and my stepfather to go live with my biological father. It was kind of like one of those things back in the day where children were still sort of property, and I was the property of my real dad, you know.
Hmm.
So I got sent to go live with him. So it was a very very lonely time for me. And if it weren't for music taking me out of my own experience and giving me a way to process it, you know, I don't know where I'd be. And it really helped me process it, because
Yeah.
singing especially is such a physical act with your breath, and so much comes out in your breath. And when you squeeze your guts tight and they hurt from grief, and you just let that go, with something beautiful that comes out, or something powerful that comes out of you in sound, um especially if it moves something, moves somebody, moves anyway, it's probably the best therapy I know of.
Hmm. I 100% agree. I couldn't agree more. Um, so, and what was kind of the moment that you decided, okay, choir and like all the like more traditional upbringings in music is fun, but I want to do this, like really do it. Was there like a pivotal moment that you had that realization, or was it more just kind of gradual? You went through life and then, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was always my dream. It was my ultimate goal or intention. Um, I think that had my mother survived, it's always it's always interesting to look back and think what could have happened. And so I can't really know, but I feel as though had my mother survived, I would have gone down a more performance or entertainment trajectory younger and earlier in my life. That's not, however, how it went.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say that it wasn't a pivotal moment. It was just a delayed dream. And at some point, there's this, it might seem silly, but there's this line from the movie Out of Africa. It's one of my favorite movies, with Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, and they're sitting there, and she's like, "Why don't you want to get married?" Basically, that's basically the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "I don't want to wake up at the end of somebody else's life." And it just hit me, you know, I am going to be at the end of my lifespan, whenever that is. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, none of us know. And this is the one thing I feel like I was put here to do, and I'm not doing it. What a waste,
Mm-hmm.
and what a shame. And not in the shame on you kind of way,
Yeah.
but just what a shame it would be if I didn't just see
Yeah.
what would happen. And so that's what I did. I started doing it, and it started becoming what I did
Mm-hmm.
pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I applaud you for coming to that realization, because it's a hard, it's a hard realization to find, and B, once you have that, especially if you've started carving a life in one direction, it's like, okay, I'm doing this thing, whatever it is, and I'm successful, but I don't like it. So I'm going to go do something that I don't know if I will be successful at, but I'll be happy. You get what I'm saying?
Totally 100%. And I think that keeps a lot of people that are extremely talented, keeps them from making that final step. I can't remember where I heard it, and I wish I could so I could quote it properly, but I've heard it said that we are all just one hard decision
Hmm.
away from a whole different life, of living a life that we would want,
Hmm.
and it's an intention thing. And I can think of so many talented people that are capable of making that big step, but it's a scary big step.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you recognize it. But you know what? I've done scarier things in my life. I just by making it to this point, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah.
So becoming a parent, things like that, I think yeah, I feel very blessed, more than
Mm.
anything, very fortunate, very blessed to have found any success
Hmm.
in sharing what I have to say through music.
Yeah, absolutely. I recognize it because I am in the midst of trying to figure out if I'm going to make that same decision. I just turned 37, and I realized on my birthday that there's some things that I'm doing that I am my absolute happiest doing, and there's some things that I am not. Like, I enjoy doing the task, if that
Right.
makes sense,
Sure.
because it's what I went to school for, it's what I fell in love with, but the manner in which I am doing the task and the situation I am in, I am not the happiest.
Sure.
So I am about 12 to 18 months away from, like, okay, I'm fine. I'm in a position where I feel like I'm ready to make this jump. You get what I'm saying? So it's,
Yeah, I totally do. And I will send and keep a good thought for you in that regard. It's a big decision, but I'll tell you what, if at 37 I could have seen a window into what was possible,
Mhm.
I would have pulled the trigger back then on it.
Yeah.
Sorry for my vernacular. I want to be more sensitive. Pulling the trigger is probably an old turn of phrase that should be
Nope, you're
retired,
good.
but
I am
um
in no way politically correct of any kind.
okay. I don't
I
want
say
to
stuff I
offend
regret.
anybody.
I say stuff I regret all the time. So don't
I just
feel.
want to sing songs and write
Yeah.
songs. I don't want
r-
to offend anybody.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, but no, yeah. So I'm right there, and it's just kind of like I'm waiting for, like, and not even waiting. Like, I'm just trying to make sure that, like, there's some certain things that are taken care of before I make this jump. You get what?
Yeah,
So
I totally get it. You'll get there and you'll know. You'll know in
yeah.
your heart one time. And you just kind of like when I was in the Coast Guard, and you have to, when you first get there, you have to take a swim test, and you walk up and you go like this and you jump straight in. Oh, and you just got to do it. You
Yep.
just can't hesitate. When
Nope.
it's time for you to step up there, just just do
Time to
this
go.
cross cover and get down in there and make it happen for yourself.
Yep. It's
I'll be
time to go.
cheering.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. So, um, jumping back into your music, when did you kind of start writing your own music? How long ago did you start, like, writing your own music?
I've been writing my own music all of my life. Uh, Music that I remember, music that I have put out commercially, um, probably closer to, I'd say 15, 15 or so years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's
And
cool.
everything was kind of a lead up to that. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, it took me a while to dig deep enough to actually say anything real in a song.
Fair.
At
Yep.
first it was just like light flowers, everything's, I just didn't know how to say or articulate my experience lyrically in a way that I felt was really saying what I wanted to say. And I feel like that over time I've been able to get a better handle on that.
Gotcha. That's cool. So would you say early on you were writing what you thought people wanted to hear, and now you're kind of writing for what you want to say. Is that kind of a fair?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. I was having a hard time just being my authentic self and articulating that, because what I've learned over time is that there's value in just expressing your experience, because there's somebody else out there that can connect with that experience, and music unites us in that way. At first, I was doing a lot of editing as well. I was bringing stuff to a co-writing partner, James Singer, and he
Mhm.
and I were going back and forth, and I was editing what he was doing and changing it. So it was kind of like an amalgamation of just learning how to put ideas. And it's always easier to edit somebody else's work than your own, because you're not emotionally attached to somebody else's work in the same way. So it's a really good exercise in that way. And that was really great practice. So I'd say it kind of started more like that.
Nice.
Yeah, and as a line or something like that, sometimes it would just be one line in a song that Jim brought, or a poem that he brought, and it'd be one song, one line, and it would make me think of something. That Coming in Low is a fine example of that. I'd been waiting to write a song that kind of captured my mother's passing and how it affected me, etc. And I just couldn't find the words to do that. That didn't sound corny, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It's a painful topic, loss. But he had written something on a piece of paper, something about a something being high in a low pressure system, whatever it was. I was
Mhm.
being all judgmental, and I was like, that's not fact. You can't have that. That's not scientifically accurate. And I said, but you can in a song, like it hit me.
Yeah.
It's like, this is poetry. And so the line that came out, the pressure is up. Um, but there's a low passing through since I found out about you. And so it was like, that made that statement a correct statement. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then that unlocked the song that I wrote about my mom, Coming in Low. I don't play it very often, it's a heavy song to me, but I treasure that. And I've had many people tell me that that's touched them very deeply, especially during times of grief and losing
Mhm.
their parent or somebody close. So that makes my heart sing to know, you know,
Yeah.
that's out
Amazing.
there.
That's always been the hardest thing for me to like comprehend is the emotional toll that musicians tend to put themselves through on a nightly basis, continuously singing some of these heavy songs that they do. Kind of as much as they say that it doesn't put them back in that dark place, like whatever the song topic was about, it's like I don't 100% buy that, because it's like there's no way that anytime you sing like a song, like a super depressing song, that doesn't kind of play on you a little bit, you know?
Well, there's such thing as cellular memory. But at the same time, that whole, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but I think it's even like a biblical thing. I wish I knew where it was that you could find it, but it's something like whatever's um done in the dark will come to light, kind of a
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And I think that when you write a song and then you put it out there, it's no longer yours. It doesn't
That's
belong to you anymore. And so, just like journaling or other things can take the power of a dark thought and put it into the light and take away the power, I think sometimes it's a therapeutic act for a songwriter. I can only speak for myself, but I,
fair.
I know that I've talked to other songwriters that have agreed that they feel very much the same way.
Mm.
It's an act of therapy, and in that way, it's songwriting is almost a selfish thing. We're processing a need to process whatever this thought is, these words, this turn of phrase, this obsession with
Hmm.
putting this idea out through lyric and music, and it's interesting. But yeah, I
It's
think I think that's why you don't have to go to that dark place, but that muscle memory, that cellular memory, it sells it for you because
hmm
it remembers.
yeah.
So you can get up there and sing it. Now that's not to say that it doesn't wear on you, but I think that what wears more is less the performance grind and more the industry side of things.
Yeah.
If it was just about singing to the fans and sharing and connecting, even though the song is a sad song, when you have people singing along or somebody coming up saying, when my dad died, I listened to that song on repeat and it really, it helped me through. I
Hmm.
mean, how can that depress you?
That's fair. Yeah.
you know and everybody is their own person, so this is, I only speaking from my experience, but that's
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about the why and the how we can do that. We're
Yeah.
just dark anyway, us songwriters, most of us are anyway. Some
Fair.
aren't. I've heard it said, Joan Baez said she was just not depressed, and it was really hard because all these songwriters around here were very, emo or whatever, and she's just like, I didn't feel that way, but here she's writing these, sad songs. Anyway, to each
Yeah.
their own.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's jump into your new song, Great Divide, which dropped 3 weeks ago. Is my math correct on that one? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks
That
ago?
sounds right. Yes, I believe so. The 21st.
Yep. So that'd be about 3 weeks ago. What's kind of the story behind Great Divide?
Great Divide came about as I was driving back and forth from Fargo to Nashville. I had been doing that drive for a good solid year, and
Mm.
it's a long drive. And even though I had a place to be in Fargo, I had my home here and I had a place in Nashville where I stayed and I was quite comfortable. I don't know. I started feeling a little bit homeless in a way, like a wanderer. Every time I was there, I wanted or needed to be here and vice versa. You know what I mean? And as I mentioned, I am a veteran of the United States Coast Guard, and I've always been patriotic. I always have. It's just kind of my nature. And as I was driving along, I noticed there was a big garrison size, the big giant flags out
Yeah.
flying above a lot or something, and
Hmm.
I saw it, and for the first time in a long time, Tom, I looked and I was like, you know what? That feels like home to me. It's like no matter where I go, wherever I see that flag, that that is my home.
Hmm.
And I started thinking about the fact that we're struggling as a nation to come together as people and come to the table and have solid discourse about the things that matter to us and how to be a unified nation again, and move forward, and how to truly be the best America we can be,
Hmm.
and I've always been one that believes we have more in common than we have in different.
Yep.
I think that's true in all of the travels I've done, at least in North America, Canada, Mexico, and in the US. And so I kind of grabbed my voice recorder and said, this whole country's my home, no matter where I go. And then, sang a couple little lines in there, and I couldn't really get it where I wanted. I worked on it a
Hmm.
while. I just couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted. Like I said, I didn't want it to sound corny. I wanted it to be available for everybody.
Hmm.
And so I took it to my good friend Dave Lenahan, who's just a phenomenal songsmith in Nashville. And he and I worked on it together. I kind of told him my vision. He was on board immediately. He has such a songwriter's heart and just such a good heart. And yeah, we worked on it. This was one of the first songs that I've ever gone back to and gone back to and gone back to before I felt it was ready. Most of the time songs come and then I'm just kind of, that's what I'm doing for the next, 13,
Fair.
26 hours. But
Yeah.
in this case, it was, we knocked it out over a few sessions. And then when we were done and had it where we felt it was right, I took it to John D. Willis, because why wouldn't I? He's a phenomenal producer. He's produced some of the best names in music. And more than that, he's just same thing. He's got a heart of gold as well. And he's really there for the song. And so he said, what do you want this song to be? What is it? And I said, I want it to be accessible. And
Hmm.
he set forth to produce a brilliantly accessible song. It has elements of rock, of Americana. There's some soul vibe in there. It's just really it was really a beautiful labor of love. And so
Yeah.
we put this out there as a little trio, me, Dave, and John, And it's kind of like, from Dave and I, a call to unity of like, come on, guys, we can do better. We're family.
Hmm.
We've got pride, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes us strong. Let's get back to what matters. And so, it starts out with a scene of people having coffee in a small town, and then there's donuts in Chicago. Just, the whole concept of we're all doing the same thing in
Mm,
the morning. You know what I mean?
yeah.
We're all just trying to get up and get our day started and trying to raise our kids and have a happy life and pursue happiness. In the way that we are afforded because we live in this great nation.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. That's really cool. Oh, so you said it was written over the course of a couple of sessions. Did you go out and play it at like shows or whatnot before you went in and started producing it, or was it straight once you wrote it, it went straight into production?
Oh no, you know what? I am notorious for this. I'll go out and I'll play a song and I'll be like, you know what? There's two words in there that they just didn't hit right for
Right.
me. And so I'll go back, for something like, okay, in this case, that was the case where there was just like something that wasn't quite hitting right. And I take it
Mm,
back to Dave and be like, we got to look at this again. Um, I played it. I played it. Yes, I played it out. I started playing it out pretty fast because I guess I felt like it was, I don't know. It was just I was compelled to get it out there. I felt like that song needed to be out. It had
mhm.
something to say. And
Yeah.
I would just sing it in hopes that every audience that heard it with the right intention.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's best practice or not, but I'm like a little kid when I write a song. Sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, check out my coloring pages. Will you put them on your fridge and show all your friends?"
Nice.
What can I say? What can I say?
Hey, it's fair enough. It's a really amazing song. I enjoy it. It's
Thank you.
it's definitely really cool and accessible, like you said. When you mentioned the word accessible, I didn't quite understand what you meant, but then going back and thinking about the song, it's like, oh yeah, that is like the accurate word to describe it. So
Yeah, isn't that funny? John's the kind of producer where it's kind of a joke, but obviously, but where you could say, "Can you make that sound more orange?" and he'd understand
that's
what
funny.
you meant. He's tremendous. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. He brings out the best in me as a vocalist too in the studio, and I really appreciate that.
That's cool. So with Great Divide out now, what's kind of the plan as we look into the last half of the summer? It's so crazy that we're already like halfway through the summer right now. It's
No, I'm not impressed with the time space continuum right now. I'm feeling like it's clicking along faster than I'd like it. It's on
Mhm.
75 speed and I only want it on 45. But you
Fair.
know what? That's okay. Um, I do have an album written
Hmm.
and I would like to put that out. I would like to get back with John. Of course, he'll be my first call on that and get into the studio. I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter of some sort to get that done so I can fund that in advance. And I'm excited and hoping my fans will be excited to support the getting that project started. Um, I also have performances coming up, a number of performances.
Hmm.
I'll be touring, though the dates have not been firmly set yet in September, but I'll be touring in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, that
Nice.
area, um, North Dakota a bit. I've also just uh, accepted a residency
Nice.
in South Dakota at a phenomenal resort spa that is also positioned to be a phenomenal venue and
Mm.
event center. And it's just a cool, cool place. It was formerly a blind school built way back in the late 1800s. And it just has such a rich history of performance with the kids that attended there. And yeah, it's a really cool historic place. And I'm really excited to be part of that team working on
Mhm.
that as well. So just really busy just and continuing to write. Dave and I have a co-write scheduled coming up, I believe, next week. And yeah, that it just keeps coming.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
coming. And that's all good stuff, all
yeah.
good stuff.
It seems like you're going to be really busy throughout the rest of the summer, going into the fall. And I imagine past like October, you probably don't want to be doing too much touring in North Dakota, anyways.
Well, it's funny you should say that because actually I'm looking into doing something more towards the warmer states. And so
Mhm.
if you'd like to get me out your way, I'd love to come out your way. Let me know. I'd love to meet you in person and do some shows out your way. So let me know about that. And
Yeah.
I'll do some Florida stuff and I'm gonna check and see about some Phoenix stuff possibly too. I have family out there that I'd love to
Yeah.
see. And I'll tell you what, if I can play music and see my family, it's always the best of both worlds. So
Nice.
um, expect me to be a little bit farther south come the colder months. I'm fine with touring in the winter time.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at is you don't want to be in North Dakota having to tour across North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, all that stuff. So,
Well, I'll tell you, I've done the North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota thing for about a decade, and it is no fun to drive to gigs in January blizzards. But I'd like to say I've been fortunate. I've only had to cancel because of weather, not even maybe twice.
mhm.
One of the times we were almost all the way there and we had to cancel because we knew that if we got there we would be stuck. There'd be no way to get home. So I've been very fortunate in all of my travel, but
Right.
looking forward to a little less snow travel.
Nice, nice. I had a friend that he's from Minot. He lived up in Minot and he was in a punk band. But his band was based out of, I think it was like Bismarck or something.
Okay, sure.
And so whenever they had shows, especially during the wintertime, he was like, dude, that trip was always like a crapshoot. You never knew what the weather was going to do and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's your like that's growing up. I feel like that's just growing up in North Dakota. You got to be ready for the weather at any time. So,
No, it's very true. I don't know if you've seen the original movie Fargo, but that
mhm.
scene where it's nothing but a white screen and then suddenly headlights are right there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's I could send you some pictures of being in the passenger seat on some pretty airy, scary rides.
Right. Right. I'm good on that. I've seen some scary stuff in my life. I am good. I know exactly what you're talking about. So
Well, if you ever come up and visit, don't worry, I'll drive.
fair. Awesome. Um, so just really quick, outside of music, what have you been getting into? What do you like to do when you're not writing music, performing music, any of that stuff?
Spending time being a mom, a grandma, a friend, just living life. I love to garden. Been eating raspberries off my raspberry bushes and doing my lawn mowing. It's been really nice to be able to do my own lawn mowing here for the summer. I know it sounds silly, but and my son who attends school up in Winnipeg during the school year is 14 and he's here for the summer. And
Nice.
so been just phenomenal having him alongside. And yeah, so I love to swim. I love to hike. I'm quite outdoorsy that way, fish, things like that. So, I'm always I love to kayak. There's just always something fun to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's really cool. I haven't done a whole lot of outdoorsy stuff in a really long time. So it's like I can't really relate to a lot of that. It's like I used to go camping all the time as a kid. Like
Yeah.
we'd go down to Kentucky and camp, we'd go up into or Wisconsin and camp. And so that was kind of our thing. And then once I went to college, it was like, I think I'm done sleeping on the ground for a bit. So
Well, we need to get you glamping, is what it is. We need to get you glamping. I've got a dear friend down near Nashville. It's near Nashville who's
mhm.
doing a whole glamping resort. So I'll tell you what, we'll get you on location out in Nashville area for your podcast for one of these shows or one of
Mhm.
these weeks, and we'll get you glamping. You can do a return. It'll be Tom's return to nature, and I'll be there with you to cheer you on. Okay.
Honestly, I thought about doing a like so so every year I go to a music festival down in New Braunfels, which is in between Austin and San Antonio,
Okay.
and it's at a campground. And so the
Yeah.
first year I had brought my sleeping bag, I had brought my tent, And I was like, okay, if I need to set this up, I will. I'm good. Except I was only going to be there for a night. And so I was just like, I'll just sleep in the back of the car. That's fine. I'm good with sleeping in the back of the car. And then last year they brought me in. They're like, hey, we're going to put you in one of these. It They called it a cabin, but it was like a hard cover tent almost is kind of what it felt like, because it was just like an outhouse with a bed. So it was just kind of like, okay, that's funny. But anyways, so the one thing I've always wanted to do is like do like a fireside, like acoustic set, like a jam session type thing.
That would be awesome.
And
That would
it's
be
like, yeah, that's the one thing I really want to do. We got close to doing it once in Florida, except we were in the middle of a strip mall. And so like the fireside didn't really work. It was just like 20 bluegrass players sitting in a circle, and we set a mic in the middle, and it was okay, but it was just like
right.
it doesn't have the same effect.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha. I get it. Well, we'll talk about all kinds of opportunities to do some cool
yeah,
things for
yeah.
sure.
Nashville is the place I want to be. That's kind of like the mid step in before I make the full commitment to doing live and amplified full time. It's like I want to
Yeah,
get to Nashville because I go about 4 times a year, and it doesn't get any cheaper doing it.
it's the truth.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
um, so I don't know how people that go more than once a month, I don't know how they pull that one off, but somehow they do. So, congrats to them.
Congrats to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You only live once, right?
Right? I 100% agree. Um, so if anybody wants to check out your music, the new single, the upcoming potential album, not potential, the upcoming album later this year, next year, whenever you settle on a release date, where's the best place to find you? Online, all that fun stuff.
The best place is always to go to my website. There are links to everything right there, and it's ginapowersmusic.com. Makes it real easy. And you can find me that way on all my socials as well. It's just Gina Powers Music. And then Gina Powers Music at Gmail if you want to reach out and say hi, and have me add you to the mailing list so I can let you know what's going on. There's photos, there's music, there's a place that you can buy it if you want to support me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is there's music both before I was signed to the Human International label, during the time I was signed, and now a couple of releases after. So if you go to the website, you'll see the full breadth of my catalog, at least that which is out commercially.
Yeah, I got you. Has there, before we wrap this up, has there been talk about going back before you got signed and like re-looking and seeing if you can re-release any of that stuff, or is that a whole different process that's not necessarily worth it?
Truthfully, I've thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, but I'm a forward thinker, and I feel like if there was a song that, had some value in that way,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we could look at doing that as a re-release, remastered, remixed project in
Mm-hmm.
the future. As of right now, I guess what I've done with my band that we did in basements and in
Mm-hmm.
smaller studios, that's what it was. It is what it is. And I think it's part of the artist's trajectory. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
so I think on a level, yeah, it would be cool to go and kind of just make them the best songs they could be with a different ear, more commercial ear to them.
yeah,
But I'm okay with just letting them be what they are, which is a very point in time representation of what we were doing, what I was doing, what my band was doing, and what we had access to at the time.
fair enough. 100% agreed. I 100% get it. So, but once again, I want to thank you so much for sitting down and chat with me. It's been an absolute blast. For anybody that wants to check out your music, we will have your Spotify link below, and we'll help promote anything you have coming up. You're welcome back on anytime. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise, it's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch y'all later.